All right, it's recording.
Okay.
Yay.
Yay.
Oh, look it. You can even see me in the corner. That's really special. Hi, no, I gotta look this way. Hi, I'm Susan Knoll. I'm the care coordinator, and it is so nice to meet you. And I'm happy to be here. So Amy had asked me to come and talk about mental wellness. So we'll cover a lot of ground today, but also like open discussion, totally fine. Situations that you are coming across, we can help try to guide you. So yeah, so I run the DIP Cares program. If you have a student who you're working with and you're concerned about, or if you're concerned about yourself, there's an online referral form on the DIP Cares webpage. So if you go to fnm.edu and just search DIP Cares, it comes up. There's student resources page on there that has all kinds of resources for a lot of different things. And then there's the referral form. And the referral form is really easy. It takes like 1 minute. You don't have to give us too much information if you don't want. You can stay anonymous if you want. So we try to make it easy. And it usually, we get to a student pretty quickly once we get one of those. And they come right to me, and they come right to the house deans. So all the house deans see them just as need to know. And then Dean Shaw also sees them. So those are kind of like the core people that see it when it comes in. And it's nice to have Dean Shaw see it just in case there's something going on conduct wise. And then she can help us figure out like if there's something else going on. So we can all be on the same page. All right, let's see here. Oh, look at that little, look at that. How do you go through here? Ah, okay, cool. So you wanted to ask about balance, right? And balance is, I had to think about this for a minute, but in my mind, balance is everything, trying to compartmentalize everything that students have going on, anybody, any human being has going on, and trying to manage them all at the same time. So I feel, and let me know if you feel like this is not correct, but for students, there's so much, there's so many balls in the air, right? So there's the academic piece, there's your social lives, there's your taking care of your physical health, especially in the time of COVID, extracurriculars that you have going on, things that are going on at home with your family or your siblings, your mental health that needs to be tended to, romantic partners. And I almost didn't add this, but geopolitical events, because I realized that so many things that are happening outside of our school, especially like with COVID, with the racial issues that are happening, are really taking a toll on students. And so that's just one more area that we have to tend to. And then if you have jobs. So there could be things in addition to this, but I kind of felt like these were the main ones that I see when I'm talking to students. Would you add anything here? Are we missing any ball that we're not, that you also feel? Or does this pretty much wrap it up? Yeah.
That definitely wraps it up with work. I would also add like potentially financial stress.
Finances, definitely. Yeah, and sometimes that can fall under family needs, right? I know there's a lot of students here who are trying to help families back home. So definitely. So being able to kind of tend to each one of these in some form is balance, right? And feeling not too stressed out about it. Imbalance. So what would imbalance look like? I feel like when all those areas of your life start feeling, one is starting to take over more than the others, then you're starting to kind of slip in an imbalanced state. And I think it's normal for certain things at certain times, like your academics, right? It's clear like that ball is going to be a little bit heavier, like around midterms or around finals, right? So there's going to be definitely times where you're kind of switching back and forth, and one's going to take precedence over another, things are going on with your family. But it's when it starts happening that like one is taking way too much of your time and your energy, your mental energy, your emotional energy for a really consistent basis. And it's starting to like cause you to feel really stressed out most days and like burned out most days on a consistent basis. I think being stressed is totally normal. And I think students being stressed is totally normal, especially around certain times of the year. But if it's like every single day and you can't find any moment of joy in the day, or other things are starting to drop, then it's just kind of rethinking about those things and how can you get back into balance. I also think imbalance is when, this is more of a red flag, but when you can't really complete just basic daily living tasks, right? So I look at basic daily living tasks as like getting out of bed in the morning at a reasonable time, making it to most of your classes, making sure that you eat at some point during the day and you're getting some sleep. I know sleep is hard. I feel like it's a lot of pressure. I mean, Amy and I have talked a lot about sleep, the importance of sleep, and we totally recognize it. But I also think it's a lot of pressure to say, like, you need 8 hours of sleep a night, right? Because sometimes you don't get that. And I think that can add more stress to a student's life when we pressure them. I think it's great if you can fit that in, but sometimes it's not possible. So trying to maintain balance, I just have a few tips, especially right now, just being really nice to yourself and being gentle with yourself. I think especially as we transition from being at home during a pandemic, then being on a really strange campus. If you were here last semester or last year, that was really weird because there was like nobody around. Everything was on Zoom, right? So I think that transition to this semester has been really hard for a lot of students, and that's normal. And I think that just being patient with ourselves about that is good. And I like the tip of treating yourself as you would if a friend came to you with a crisis. What would you tell them to do, right? So I think we're really hard on ourselves more than we are on our friends and our family, but we have to start looking at ourselves as if we were a friend, and treating ourselves with kindness, because we're going through a lot right now in so many ways. And sometimes I think this is something I'm seeing a lot. I don't know about you all, but the standards seem to be the same to me that we are setting for ourselves, and that even some professors are maybe setting for their students kind of like pre-pandemic time, right? And I don't think that that's going to be helpful, because I think we have to readjust our standards right now. How about you? Like, what does that sound like? Do you feel like students or people have been like kind of holding themselves to the same high standards they've always had? Or do you see people letting it go a little bit?
I feel like the obvious lack of motivation that comes with being on Zoom, with the stress of being in a pandemic. A lot of people are still stressing on how that's affecting their performance, and just resetting that standard on it's okay to lack motivation, some reason not doing anything.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I kind of look at like a tank, and I feel like a lot of us are running not at a full tank. Maybe even some are like about to run out of gas, because there is just a lot to take in. I think the exhaustion of being on, it's so nice being in person. I really like this, but I think that whole experience, which continues, is exhausting, and you have to take that, the exhaustion, the mental energy has to be taken into account right now. It's not always going to be like that, but I think right now we have to kind of look at it like it's a priority to reset our standards. And I think trying to prioritize what needs to be done now and what can wait is a good idea. I don't know. I think everybody has their own system of organization, but I think having a system of organization is good because you can kind of see what's coming up. I know this is what you help students with, right? Like what's due this week, what can wait till next week, what needs to be done this weekend, right? And just kind of like ABC, like prioritizing all that helps. Also, I think grades, like going back to standards, like maybe grades are not going to be the same this semester, this year. So if you're expecting all A's, or you have a student who's expecting all A's, maybe talking to them or asking them if they're like, if this is flexible, right? Like, is it possible that you could get a B and you'd be okay with that? I know students have different ideas about that, but maybe even introducing the idea of like, maybe this semester will not be the strongest, but you'll still do okay. Just to lessen some of the pressure. And also setting boundaries. I just gave a really good presentation on the importance of setting boundaries for yourself and how that contributes to mental wellness and health. So some red flags that a boundary needs to be set is if you're feeling resentful toward a person or a situation, if you're feeling angry at a person or a situation, and you're feeling stressed out by the thought of a person or a situation, is usually a red flag that maybe a boundary needs to be set. And I think that sometimes boundaries can be really rigid and they can be really loose. So I use like let's say your apartment or your dorm room or something. Like you can always have the door open, but then you have to remember that people are going to always be coming in and disturbing you, right? To me, that's a loose boundary. Or you could be the type of person that always has your door closed, so you're never interacting with people. And that's a little bit rigid, right? So somewhere in between with most of all those things that we were talking about before, like all those balls, like somewhere in between is ideal if you can do it. And flexibility is required. Okay, do you all know who that guy is?
No.
Anybody? Anybody? So there is a show called What We Do in the Shadows. It is about a group of vampires. It's a comedy show, but it's about a group of vampires who live in they're like over hundreds of years old, but they live on Staten Island. And they are really funny, but there's one of them and he's called Colin Robinson, and that's Colin Robinson. And his title is the energy vampire, because every time he walks in the room, everybody's energy level like just completely like depletes. And he's like, as you listen to him talk, you're just like, oh my God, would you please stop talking? But I think I don't know, do you know who energy vampires are in your life? You know, like identifying the things or the people or the situations that really just like take it out, you know, trying to figure out how you can limit. Sometimes it's not possible, especially if it's like someone you live with, but how can you limit your time with that person, right? I also kind of look at social media as being like this. I think everybody has a different relationship, but would you say that social media is energy giving or energy draining when you look at it, or even the news?
I think it makes both.
Yeah.
I think it really depends on the content you're consuming.
Yeah, that's very true. What you're consuming is really important.
I think it depends too on the mood you enter it.
That's so true. Like if you're already feeling depleted, then don't check the news.
Yeah, yeah. And like how your mood informs your perception.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Being self-aware as you go into those spaces, I think is important. And then I think boundaries are important with that too, right? Like checking social media all day long. I feel much better if I just do it in the morning and in the evening, but sometimes that doesn't happen and it is depleting. Academically, I think there's a few things that students can do when they're stressed out. And I call them low-hanging fruit, because they are things that you can do that if you can, like just go to class, right? Just be there if you can physically, like helps wonders. Utilizing office hours. So encouraging students you work with to utilize office hours, that's like another piece of magic, right? And then participating. So saying something in a class means a lot to the professor, and it will impact students' overall grade. Those are just 3 things I always tell students who are struggling academically. Like, let's think of the things like, okay, so maybe the writing is hard. Maybe formulating sentences is hard, but if you can go to class, go. If you can stop in during an office hour once a week or every 2 weeks, that's great. And if you can participate and just like say something, the professor will remember that, you know? And then, yeah.
Do you have any tips on how to like encourage someone to get over the scary part of participating?
I know.
Because when we're already like energy depleted or we're already stressed out, participating for some people is like already really anxiety provoking.
Yeah, it can be really anxiety provoking to like, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't like, I have a lot of fright. It takes a lot of practice. You know, I think I would start small, like baby steps, maybe encouraging someone to like, they don't have to give like an entire dissertation on what they're talking about, but even like, you know, making it like 2 sentences, right? Like, so you don't have to do something super large, but even just like a few sentences is really helpful. And I think it does take practice. I think participating in class takes practice and like gaining confidence. I also think getting to know your students, or I'm sorry, your peers is helpful, because I don't know, sometimes I think it's hard to talk in front of people you don't know. And then I also think that that's where office hours comes in, because if you have practice like getting to know a professor one-on-one in their office setting, it's not as scary when you're in the class and you know them a little bit more. And I would maybe even talk to the professor about the fact that like speaking up is really hard. And do they have any other ideas? Like if that's hard for you, is there any other idea, you know? And I think participation can also be like comments on, you know, like written work, you know what I mean? If you're evaluating other people's work and stuff. So maybe also see what the standard would be from the professor, you know?
I think like backing it up to before you even get there, how are you preparing? Because preparation is often the confidence builder for participation. And then sometimes I suggest to students to say something really early on in the class before like all the stuff to say is taken, you know,
Yeah.
and then at least you've gotten that one thing in. And I'd even encourage some students to go to professors and just say, I really struggle to say something, like to know when to jump in, or it's hard for me to volunteer. Can you just call me? And sometimes
That's a
professors
good
are
idea
like,
too.
okay, sure. And then once they do that a couple of times, maybe you can't put that on the professor for a whole semester, but there was one student I was working with who the whole semester has passed and she hasn't said anything. And the professor's now saying you have to participate. And she feels like she's already identified as the girl who doesn't talk.
Mhm.
And she's like so uncomfortable than just going in and suddenly talking. Right. So I
like gone on
suggested,
too
like, can you
long.
just ask the professor to call on you and like break that,
Yeah.
break that mood. But then I think too, there's like, what is participation? Why does it have to be verbal? So there is a professor on campus whose name I don't remember who it's engagement, not participation. I think it's an ENE professor.
Yeah.
And so she looks at like your notes. She looks at like, what are you doing on commenting? Where are you like,
Totally.
do you look engaged? Are you writing down things? Like, are you thinking through? Because sometimes people have to think before they can talk about things. So if we try to like reframe participation as engagement, then talking to people like, how are you engaging and how can you show the professor that you're engaging? It's not just about raising your hand in class. There's other ways to show your engagement.
Definitely. And
And
I think
help
the
reframe that
professor will
conversation.
respect that, especially if they know that that's a struggle for you, right? Like talking all the time for some people is not a struggle. And then saying one sentence is a huge thing for other students, right? But I do think the professor has to know that about you because then they'll appreciate it a little bit more.
Another thing that I would add would be if the office hours is just an extra step, maybe staying after class to
Yep.
ask a question.
Yep. That's so true. Even just showing some kind of like interest in the class, what was said afterwards when people are gone. I love that. I think that that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, even just saying like, I really enjoyed today's class.
Yeah.
Like, I have so much to think about now. You know, is like
Let's think about
so
this
let
for a
the
while.
professor know that you
Yeah.
were there, you were present. You're going to think about things. I mean, you have to show that you're thinking about them eventually.
Yeah,
But,
yes, in some way, shape,
Yeah.
or form.
but that's a
so
good
true.
start. Right?
Yeah.
And that's a low pressure thing to say.
That's great. I hope that helps.
For sharing all that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also like paying attention to just the basic needs. Like we were talking about the sleep, the nutrition, and the physical exercise in some form, like something physical really does have an impact on your mental health and your wellness. So I always tell students if they feel too busy to eat or if they feel really exhausted or anxious and they don't have an appetite, always having like really just high caloric, high nutritious stuff that you can just quick eat, you know, nearby, like, you know, granola bars, bananas, stuff like that are just like easy that you don't have to sit down for an entire meal. I think, you know, taking the time to eat a meal is great if you can, but making sure that if you don't have time or you don't have an appetite, that you at least have something nutritious nearby, because it really does impact how we think and how we feel. And I think sometimes we underestimate the power of nutrition and food in our mental wellness. And then I always say, like, even if 3 things, so what do you need to do every single day, you know, for yourself, for self-care? Like, can you think of something like that you need to have in order for the day to go well?
I like to start off like my day listening to music.
Oh, I love that
That's
music.
just, like, or like positive music. So
Yeah,
it's, like,
that's awesome.
uplifting. I think for me also like going to the gym on weekdays.
Yeah,
It's a good way.
yeah. Going to the gym. What else?
I like to end my day by making some tea and drinking it.
Oh, I love that tea time. I have tea almost if I can every day at 1 o'clock. Yeah. So I think knowing what that is for you, right? Like getting outside for 30 minutes a day, talking to a certain person, having at least one meal with a friend, whatever it is, and then really treating that really like there of course there's gonna be things that are unexpected that come up, but really like protect that time, like block it out on your calendar. That's what I do is like block it out on my calendar because it's like, no, this means a lot and this helps me write myself, right? So that when the stress comes in the afternoon, I don't know, there's something grounding about tea. Like I really think that that's for me, that's really helpful. But for somebody else, it might be taking a 30-minute walk or even a 15-minute walk over their lunch break, right? And then just like really guarding that.
I think it's important too to remember that self-care can be moments
Yeah,
in time. They don't have to be like
routines.
they don't have to be routines or like ritualistic, like making a cup of tea, but like how do you say goodbye to your roommates every day? Do you feel connected when you leave them? Or like I do that with my family. When I leave, when they all part in the morning, I make sure that there's a connection
Yeah,
that's engaged so I can go on with my day knowing that they all know that they're loved through the day, right? You know what I mean? And that like carries me a lot because if it's been like a stressful morning or it's a stressful day or whatever, like I know that they're walking through their day knowing that they're loved and that we're connected as a family. But that takes like 30 seconds, right? It's not a huge, big,
yeah,
elaborate thing. It's just enough to know that like we've looked at each other and connected as a family.
and you kind of set a foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it doesn't, I just say that as an example that it doesn't have to be like this big thing that you do. It can be just a few moments in time
totally.
that, bring you some kind of like nourishment for your day.
Yeah,
I think
Yeah.
a similar one for me. And it is kind of also a routine, but it takes like 10 seconds. I just like open up my blinds. And there's something about that.
Mhm.
I don't know if
I have the
it's
same thing.
sunny or cloudy out, but
Yep.
like whatever it is, there's something about that that like
Yep.
brings me a little life in the morning and
Yep.
gets me like going.
I
Yeah.
love that. And that's simple, but it's like it's like a thing you're doing to let in whatever kind of light there is, like you're letting it in and the day is starting. So really talking to students about what those are for them and then how do you build that into the day.
Can I ask a question about balance before you move on?
Yeah.
There's women, like I always talk to students about stress and there's like chronic stress and acute stress. And sometimes people use the language good stress and bad stress. I try to stay away from that language, but you've been talking about like kind of chronic imbalance. Are there times when imbalance is not dangerous? Like if it's like finals time where everyone's in balance.
Yeah,
right?
Totally. That's what I
Imbalance
mean.
during
I think there's going to be
finals.
times when it's like it's stressful, or let's say something comes up like a financial need, right? Like let's say like your car broke down, right? So now you have to like get extra hours or do something extra for a couple of months to make extra money, right? To get paid for this maintenance. I totally think that's normal. And sometimes it can last a little while. Like I don't know. I mean, I think it's like semesters just in general, like when you're here, they can be stressful,
So balance is something that we should look at as fluid. Right?
Yeah, I like that. Fluid and sometimes long term. Like I think there can be a longer term imbalance, but as long as it's not impacting all those other things, like your relationships aren't falling apart. You're not failing all of your classes because of, let's say you're working 20 to 40 hours a week, right, to make up for this thing. And then everything in your academics is falling apart. To me, that's like it's not dangerous, right? But it could be weighing on your mental health to a degree that it's something needs to change. And whether that's like something else has to come off your schedule or we have to explore resources together so that you're not working so much. I think when the other balls start dropping a lot and it's having like a really negative impact on your relationships, your grades overall, does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I like that, pointing that out, like the imbalance can be, it can be sometimes the imbalance can go on for a little while.
Yeah.
You know?
And just like with stress, we can't stop stress.
No.
Stress is a neurological response. We can change our relationship with our stressors, but we can't stop imbalance, right? Like life will be in.
So things are going to
sometimes
call for your
imbalance,
attention, at
But
certain times
what-
more than
So
others.
we need to like monitor it and
Yeah.
yeah.
I think so. And like just doing, I think making sure like what is the minimum for you? You know, like while this other thing is going on, like are you able to get most of the other things you need to get done? You know, knowing that this other thing is going to be taking the majority of your time. So mental health, I just wanted to go over, I like mental health to me is wellness and it's like maintenance. Like that's what mental health means to me. It's like, just like your physical health, it's something that you tend to regularly in order to prevent illness, you know? So it's important. It's something that everybody has. It's inseparable from your physical health. It's always on a continuum, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It's worth making time for. It's part of being a human being, something that we need to take care of. It can be positive and negative. It's changeable, complex, and real. And what mental health is not is weakness, or mental health issues, I should say, are not weakness. They're not shameful. They're not something that you're imagining. They're not always something negative. Like I think the stress, right? Like stress can be not always negative. It can actually help you perform better in certain cases, even though in the moment it's kind of difficult to hold. And something that you decide that you're going to have, something that you think about only when it's broken. It's not interchangeable with the term mental illness. It's not feeling good all of the time. Not something you can snap out of. It's not something that's just fixed and like concrete. And I think that's kind of what you're getting to too. It's very fluid and it's not fakeness. Always nice. So talking about like kind of when things are becoming imbalanced, like there will always be, I think there's going to be imbalances. There's just things that are going to demand more of your attention than others. Like I think of too, like thinking like for college students, like a relationship breakup, right? Like that's going to cause some imbalance for you for a while. You know, it depends on how it happens, how long you've been in the relationship with another person. But when that happens, I kind of expect, you know, like if a student gets referred for that, I kind of know it's going to be a little bumpy. You know, it's going to be a bumpy ride. It can be. And that's okay. We just got to put some extra supports in place, right, for that student. Just kind of knowing, okay, this might be a little rough going through this. So what can we do to make you feel a little bit less imbalanced in other areas? But red flags to me, like when we're starting to move like into the mental illness category, where something's wrong with your health, is not sleeping for days, for several days, or sleeping all of the time. And then having a rapid change in mood. Like I think as the semester goes on, there's gonna be days when you feel good and there's gonna be days when you don't feel good, or when students feel good and they don't, and that's normal. Like yesterday was not the same as today, right? Like the sun helps for me, you know, but I don't know. Like I feel better today than I did yesterday because it's so dark. But rapid is like what you want to watch for, like something rapid. Like in one morning you were fine, and then like an hour later you're just like super irritated and snapping at everybody, right? And that's kind of an interesting transition, right? That's just something to look at. Decline in your typical functioning. So I think everybody kind of has a baseline for where they function, and I look at that as referrals come in for students. Like if I know a student has been referred every fall, like in mid-November, and I can look at their pattern, right, and be like, oh yeah, we've had this for the past 2 academic years. Like this is a hard time for them, right? Like that's typical. Yeah.
Are these, for clarification, are these like warning signs for like when stress is too much?
Yeah, I think these are warning signs when that imbalance is starting to impact you in a more dangerous way.
So would these be warning signs that then would lead to like seeking out professional help
Yes.
or something? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Problem, yeah.
Sorry, Susan, would you
no
say,
problem.
just to build on that, would you say if while working with students, these warning signs, these red flags showed, that would be the time for Dick Cares?
Oh, definitely. Oh, yes. I think these are Dick Cares referrals. That's a good way to put it. I like that.
Understanding now.
Yeah, I think these are definitely like when you see a student who, okay, so you got an F in one in your chem class. I don't know. I see that all the time. So to me, that's not, it's not as much of a red flag unless they were getting straight A's all along and then all of a sudden something falls off, right? Like that's not typical for that person. Yeah.
How about if you're already working with a student who already has professional help, but still on that edge?
I think that that's still another Dip Cares report because it tells us that the support that they're getting is not sufficient. You know what I mean? Like it's not helping or it needs to be changed in some way. And that can be really helpful information for the person who's working with them, or for me, if I'm talking to a student, like sometimes once a week therapy or every 2 weeks is not enough, right? So it just tells us that maybe something else needs to happen too. Like maybe a class needs to be withdrawn. I don't know, something else. So I'd say if you know that they're seeing a therapist, but maybe they're only seeing them once every couple of weeks, and you know that they're still like they're going in this trajectory that's not good, I would say refer them to Dip Cares because that gives us a larger picture too of kind of how the student's doing. You don't have to solve it for them, you know, but it's good to notice it and it's good to tell somebody that that's happening. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Problems thinking clearly. I think again, like this is one of those things that can happen once in a while, but if it's like every day that you can't put thoughts and sentences together because I don't know, because either you're too depressed or you're too anxious and it's really hard, that can be a red flag. And then lashing out at others, having apathy for just like not having, you know, any energy to do anything, and not really caring about anything is a red flag. Feeling disconnected from your loved ones, so people who you usually see and rely on, and then suddenly not really staying in touch with them. Odd behaviors, especially for that person. I'm trying to think of an example of odd behaviors. You know, like walking around campus. I don't know. I think you all would know, like if someone's like, that does not seem right. Yeah, like, yeah, I can't think of anything that wouldn't like be, I don't want to even risk identifying anybody. So, but I think you would know if like something's like a little off, like with the way that the person is behaving. And then always feeling anxious or on edge or always feeling hopeless or down most days. Always like red flags. It's one thing to have a good day and then a bad day, but to be having bad days every day is not good.
I have a question. So when you're like referring someone to Dip Care, is it anonymous or?
It can be anonymous. Yeah, you can put on there, I don't want the person to know that I'm referring them. Sometimes they might know because you're the only person who shared it
I've
with.
had that happen.
You know, yes, we have had that. So, you know, we can try to be as delicate as possible with it. You know what I mean? Like if you're like, you know, a lot of times we'll just ask like an HA, like to do routine check-ins, right? Like, or, you know, we'll have the house team be like, hey, I'm meeting with everybody this month and this is our day to meet, you know, so we can usually do it kind of anonymously if you tell us like you don't want them to. Those are kind of the methods we use sometimes.
Yeah, it can be uncomfortable. And I've had a few students stop talking to me.
Yeah, that can
And
happen.
And
It can
that's
happen.
unfortunate, but there
Yeah.
were issues of like alcohol and drug
Yeah.
use that needed to be reported,
Yep.
or you know, other serious issues that when I really had the conversation with myself, it came down to this person needs help, and
Yep.
I would rather ruin the relationship and have them mad at me and we get them help, you know. So
Suicide is another, or suicidal thoughts is another area that I just tell people not to mess around with. Like if a student has told you that they just really don't see a future or they don't see what the purpose is of living anymore, you know, letting them know, like, I'm really worried about you. And so I'm going to tell somebody just because I want to make sure that you stay safe. And they might be like, no, you can't. But I've done this my entire social work career. Like, I would much rather be on the end of someone who over intervened in the case of a suicidal thought or ideation rather than read the news, you know, and say like, I knew about that. You know, I would just rather have that person not talk to me, but I know that they're safe and hopefully they'll talk to you again. You know? Yeah.
So, in these reports, does like the person, do they get in trouble at all? Or like, how does that work? Like, what is the response?
Yeah, no, they never, if it's a dip cares report, they never get into trouble. Unless there's something that they were doing that was like a violation of school policy. And that's happened before. So there can sometimes be a case where there's like an open conduct case. But I will say, like, in the, let's say the case of alcohol use, like, let's say that a person is always getting inebriated, right? And so somebody's worried about them, they refer them to dip cares. We wouldn't open up a conduct case because we know that they're let's say they're under 21, they're violating alcohol policy. The way we would handle that is saying, like, we're really concerned about you. Can you do an assessment with our provider, which we have. Much more preferable that way. So no, they don't usually get in trouble unless there's like some clear violation of policy.
I had a student just yesterday.
Yeah.
She knew she was like someone, she said reported through dip cares, and I kept trying to change the language for that. But
referred to.
She was leaving me to go meet with her house dean, and
Yeah.
her perception was she was going to be expelled. She's like, when you meet with the principal, you get expelled from school. And I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
that is not at all what we're talking about here. So that was a first year who had that experience.
There's also been a lot of stories passed around too of like I don't know, like there's fear of expulsion for
Mhm.
sure.
Mhm.
Of like if you share anything that shows that you're not entirely on your game, that you could get like
Yeah, it's pretty rare.
semester like leave of absence or things like that.
Yeah.
I've had students concerned. I think we talked about this, right? Concerned about forced leaves.
Yeah.
Um,
They're very rare, and I would say that there's almost always a bunch of information that people don't have about them. You know what I mean? There's like a larger picture usually at one thing the college, I think, with those kinds of things, I do think the college has a responsibility for, and they will ensure is as much as they can, is community impact. So I think that is kind of where with the suicidal thoughts can get a little bit tricky, because it's, if you've ever lived with somebody who's suicidal, it can get really stressful. And I think the biggest thing is making sure that that person has access to help and they're accessing it. But, knowing that you feel this way and only relying always on like another student to like say these things all the time, it's, and then that person starts getting impacted. It's kind of like, okay, we need you to talk to a professional about this, like having another student be your therapist, or having to listen to how suicidal we feel all the time can get really stressful. So we feel a responsibility for both students in those situations. And I'd say that that's kind of where things can get a little tricky, but still I would say expulsions are pretty rare. Forced leaves are also very rare. Yeah.
This might be maybe not, this might be a weird question, but how about when we're working with a student where we know from their background that if they were to be put on leave of absence, that will strip them of any kind of counseling assistance, medical resources, just from their background, or if they get sent home, how that works there. But then the school, if it's a suicidal case where the student really can't handle school and really needs to leave of absence, the school does make the decision. I wouldn't say true though. I've seen it a lot of putting them on a leave of absence, which is just counterproductive. So in that case, would you still recommend dip cares?
I definitely would. Definitely. And I think, so the way that works is usually, let's say like a student has been having suicidal thoughts. So our process is that they have to talk to a therapist for their professional kind of judgment as far as, can this student return to the campus and engage in 4 classes and engage in all this other stuff, or would that be detrimental to their mental health? And I think it's definitely a case-by-case basis. It's looking at, I think that's where it's also really good to have like an ongoing therapist, especially at the Student Wellness Center, if you can, because then that therapist kind of knows you pretty well and like your overall kind of like your situation. And then they usually recommend what they feel like would be best for the student based on everything that they know. And then the college will follow whatever the recommendation is for that. So part of my job as the care coordinator is to try to connect with students if they are on a leave of absence, like what is at home for you? You know, if you have the student health insurance program, usually you can keep it for the year, unless you've just started and you go home, and they usually can't keep the health insurance. But if you've been here, like let's say until November, and you were to take a leave of absence, you will have your insurance until the following August, right? So you keep that with you, and it's Highmark, so it's like every state, but a lot of students don't know that. So
You're
I can
talking in
try.
particular about an international student,
International
right?
student.
Yeah, international students get a little bit trickier, but I've been trying to help them find what they can when they're at home. Yeah, but it can be tricky. It can definitely get tricky. I think the line that always has to be walked is, will it exacerbate your mental health to be here? You know, or are you accessing services? It's really a case by case basis. There is not one size fits all at all, from what I've seen. That's only what I've seen.
And there's financial aid considerations
There's
too,
that
right? 'Cause
too.
some students have financial aid packages for 8 semesters only, and then you miss a semester because you're on leave.
You get one
That can
more.
really derail you.
You get one more.
You get
one more.
If you're not too far into the semester, because then it's just lost.
Exactly. No, that's why I tell students too. I think letting students know like that we didn't go down there, that one, that if you are not feeling well, I mean, if things are kind of already in crisis on a pretty consistent basis in the beginning of the semester, really think about that, because you're totally right. If like you are in crisis most of the semester and you aren't taking leaves, and then let's say you end up failing all of your classes, you've lost all those credits and you paid for the semester, you know? So it's like, I think trying as much as possible to kind of be cognizant of that, because the financial piece can get really, really tricky. Yeah. I have to go like around 12. So I don't know what time it is.
It's 10 up.
Okay, cool. I mean, this is I'm glad we're having this conversation, because it's good to just have to know, you know, and like have facts about it. To me, mental illness and mental health is the same as would be for our physical health. So mental health is like a general state of well-being in your mind, and it's something that you have to take care of. Whereas mental illness is when something is disrupting your state of mind, and it's interrupting how you're thinking, how you're feeling, and how you're acting. So I'm trying to get students to look at this more like our physical health, right? Like, and anytime if you have a broken ankle, you would not just continue hobbling around campus with it, right? Like you go and get it looked at. And I think the same thing, we should be looking at our mental health the same way. We often don't, but it's the same, it's very similar. Mental illness in college is just a few facts. So it's very common. 1 in 5 students has a mental illness. And the most common in college are anxiety. And those can take the form of obsessive compulsive disorder, panic disorder, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Those are all types of anxiety disorders. And there's other ones too, but those are common in college. And then depression, eating disorders, substance abuse, and then suicide. So those for college students are kind of like the top mental illness concerns, like where something is diagnosable by a doctor. And college is a hard time, and I know you all can relate to this, because it's a major transitional period between high school and your adult life, right? So there's a lot of changes happening these 4 years. Peers start having more of an impact on how you're thinking, what you're doing. Your social life is really important. And that can cause an imbalance in some ways. You have stressful loads that you're managing, and you have to manage really a lot of aspects of yourself. So you have to, like the ones that we were talking about before, who you are is like a family member, right? A sister, a daughter, you know, and then also like then you're a student, then you're also an employee. And I mean, there's so many aspects of the self that you're trying to manage. And then also like starting to become more politically involved and engaged for a lot of students during this time of life can take a toll mentally.
I would add in there, Susan, that college students are being asked to perform in ways that the prefrontal cortex isn't necessarily developed to perform.
Yeah.
And it varies in every student, of
Yeah.
course, but, and so there's this, students have this, faculty and staff have this expectation of students to be adults, but, and students have that expectation of themselves,
Yeah.
but they're not actually operating with fully developed adult brains. And that's not about maturity, and that's not about, that's just about like
Biological
science,
thing.
right? And
Yeah.
science, of course,
About
and so-
neuroscience, right? Like,
and then
Yeah.
chime in, Saisha, but that
Yeah.
always frustrates me that we're asking students to do things independently and to perfection or to mastery without offering them the support, because not all of those students are prepared. Not all of those students' brains are prepared to do that independently and to mastery. You know, and I think we are missing that link of offering this, like readily offering the support, or shifting the way that we're asking students to do things so that they can operate with independence and mastery as they move, you know, as that part of their brain develops.
When being at a college that requires people to be like on campus, living on campus, I think especially for like out of state or international students, like your support, your core support system
it's so gone.
entirely
Yeah, it's not there.
changed. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's another area, like, I think sometimes we think, oh, the student's coming here by themselves, and like that's the only thing you work with or you see. But especially for this age, like a lot of students are still dependent on their family members, and maybe it will be for a long time. So I think, I know we don't involve families too much, but I do think that that's a key part that we're also missing, that the role that family members could play or help us with is sometimes overlooked too, because you're not just an individual person, you're part of a system. And
Yeah.
you know, I think about that a lot,
And for a lot of first years, like
Well,
that family, that
especially
parent
first years.
support is just pulled out from underneath them, and many of them embrace that, right?
Yeah,
Many of them want that, but
Yeah.
really still need their parent support.
yeah,
And many of them didn't have a lot of parent support to begin with, but that's one support that's just pulled away super fast.
yeah,
And that's, I
It's a
think
struggle.
that's tough.
yeah. And then, like you're saying, it's made worse if you're an international student or you're far away from home, like if you're from California. I definitely see that. So yeah, okay, thanks for stopping by. Okay, well, we're gonna wrap this up. I wanted to kind of
Thank you, Lauren.
talk about this idea of mental health always being on a continuum. This is like your whole life, right? We will likely be in one of these categories, at least one of these categories during our lives. We'll probably spend most of our time in one of the categories, right? But it's really common and normal that we're always going to be moving between these categories. So there's excelling where things are just going really, really, really well and you're performing at your best and you're fully realizing your potential. There's thriving when, you know, things are overall things are going very well. All the things are happening. You're sleeping pretty well, like eating pretty well. You're seeing people. You're mostly positive and calm most times. And then there's surviving, which I would categorize a lot of students. You know, I'd say between thriving and surviving seems to be a lot of where I see students normally, right? Like, so these are mild risk, you know, but yes, there's times when you can't sleep. There are times where you're going to feel nervous, and there's times when you're going to be worried and irritable and distracted and withdrawn. But you don't want to stay in there too long. Hopefully you also have some days where you feel like you're thriving, right? So hopefully you're going back and forth between those, and maybe once in a while excelling. And then struggling, I would say this is where Dip Care's referrals usually come in, because there's a difference between being worried all the time and then feeling anxious all the time, right? It's okay to be worried about something that's happening that's normal, you know, like your parents undergoing a medical procedure. That's normal to be worried about that. But when it starts turning into anxiety and like a daily feeling, or being anxious about things that maybe don't warrant anxiety, like that is something that should probably be addressed. When you're not performing well academically or in other areas, where you're not sleeping very well and you can't, you know, have a good appetite and you're tired all the time or depressed all the time. So I'd say a lot of students get referred to the Dip Cares support program in this case, trying to figure out exactly what's going on and how can we get you to some help. And then lastly is in crisis. In crisis kind of maybe would warrant a little bit more quicker action. If you're ever worried about the safety, or like if a student leaves you and you're like, I don't know if they're going to be okay tonight, you know, kind of trying to get some more immediate support. So there's always after hours counseling. Student Wellness Center is available 24/7. If you don't feel comfortable doing a welfare check, you can go to the room. You can just talk to your house dean. That's always a good place to start. Like if it's like, well, I could submit a DIP cares referral, but I don't know when someone's going to get this, and I'm worried about them within the next few hours, I would contact your house dean. And, you know, public safety does welfare checks for us all the time, as far as like if nobody's seen a student or heard from a student and we know that they've been struggling with depression for weeks, and we can't reach them, phone, email, we've tried everything, we will ask an officer to go to a room just to make sure they're okay. And that's helpful because then we can like know that somebody talked to them and they're like, yeah, I'm okay, I just haven't returned my texts. Okay, fine. But if it's like, no, actually I have been like unable to get out of bed, right, then we take some other kind of intervention. And I'd say crisis is like when you're, you know, there's a severe change in weight, when you're not, like I was saying, you're not sleeping days, when you're missing all of your classes, when you're in like extremely hopeless state of mind, and when you're so anxious that you can't get out of bed. So it's like kind of taking everything in the struggling category, just like to the nth degree. And again, you don't have to decide those things. Like you can just talk to your house dean, talk to me, talk to Amy, you know, somebody, like tell somebody, and then we can kind of figure out how to help the student. I think that's it. Taking care, you know, like how do you take care of your mental health? Making sure that you talk to people, staying active, eat well, drink sensibly, stay in touch with your loved ones, make sure you're taking breaks, accept yourself and your flaws, and then take advantage of all the resources, which I know as you all know, but these are more mental health resources, but Student Wellness Center, peer health educators, Active Minds, they're going to do a bunch of stuff in November, which I'm really excited about, but they have great resources, like how to offer support to a friend and have a conversation. That's all, and I love their website. The Steve Fund is for students of color. So they have a specific crisis text line for students of color. It's 741-741, but you just text Steve to 741-741. And they have other mental health resources for students of color on their site. Trevor Project has all kinds of resources for non-binary students. And then the DIP Cares page I was telling you, there's lots of resources on there. And I would just say, if you're ever just even wondering, I don't know what I should do, you can always, even if it's the most mildest concern, I'd rather have a student missing a couple classes than know that they've just missed 3 weeks of class. Like, please tell us like earlier, the better. And if you're ever concerned for safety, PSAFE can always do a welfare check. That's all I have.
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah.